Hi, my name's Rachel Evans. Thanks for joining me today. I want to have a very quick chat with you about third party risk. Now, you all know third parties, they could be subcontractors, individual contractors, outsourced parties, it could be a software platform, service outsourcing, even postal, for example, where we are passing our information to a third party to manage that on our behalf. Now, to measure that, I designed a new model called CVC. Now, CVC stands for criticality, vulnerability, and consequences. And we can actually measure it or view it rather as a traditional management triangle. So we have criticality, vulnerability, and we have consequences. So criticality, vulnerability, and consequences. And these three are strongly linked. The sum of these is what gives us our third party risk. Now, criticality, what we're typically measuring is our dependency. Our dependency is our relationship, the criticality of the operation, our dependency within our operating model for the tools, the resources, etc. Then we have sensitivity. So, how sensitive are we to this relationship? Just really how vulnerable are we to a certain extent if this goes wrong? And this shows us our sensitivity. And then the other aspect we may look at is recovery. We can score these out of five. New market pens. So we've got a total of 15, and we've divided the 15 by the three, we get our average. Now, when we look at vulnerability, we're measuring technology, privacy, and operations. So we're talking about what the technology that they use or we use with them. So it's a two-way relationship. So how vulnerable is their platform? If you're passing them data, do you really know how safe that is, what their own controls are? We want to know how they're managing and controlling access to your specific data, and from an operations point of view, how are they structured, how are they managing people, how are they doing things like managing access to your tools, your systems, and so on and so forth. And now to consequences. The first thing we always consider is regulatory. So, if you're pharmaceutical, for example, you may have a much higher level of regulatory concerns than somebody who works in construction. And I am generalizing a bit there, but the medical field tends to be very highly regulated. The banks regulated, and certain fields around manufacturing probably not, certainly not as regulated as one would hope at times. So the next thing we're going to look at is sensitivity. So, what happens if something goes wrong? How sensitive is anybody going to care? If there's a high risk of reputational impact, for example, we're going to look at that quite closely. Hence, market sensitivity and reputational damage are really important. So, when we're looking at our third party risk, we're considering how critical the operation is, the tools, the process, and the people, How vulnerable? What risk profile do they present us with? And what are the consequences if things were to go wrong? If you imagine, so we can say here we've got an average of three, we've got an average of two, we've got an average of five, two, 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 divided by three leaves us two, and so on. So we can say that we have a score of 10. So 10 out of 15. So we're starting to creep up, and this is a relationship that we would want to look at quite closely. Now, we would measure this against our other partners if we have them, or we may use this to try and measure just our own exposure to one particular supplier. Now, vulnerability, this is key. You know the criticality of the operations, you understand the consequences of something going wrong. When it comes to vulnerability, you need to be very careful on what you measure. You need to be objective, not subjective. Anyway, that was a very quick introduction. I hope in some way that helps. If you've got any questions at all, please don't hesitate to ask. Thanks a lot. Have a great day. Bye.